All right, hello, good morning, good evening from whenever, wherever you may be watching. This is the Yard Sign, Florida's oldest, most non-trusted political source. We are, I think, probably one of the oldest podcasts, political podcasts in Florida, though. As you can see, a little bit of a different look than we usually have, as we are broadcasting from our satellite studio, our very frigid satellite studios today, as we're are just and you know, even in 30-degree weather, I'd say I still am glad that we live in Florida, because I certainly don't want to deal with any of that winter mess that the rest of the country is dealing with. But not
Agreed.
only do we have a special show for you today, but we also have a special guest for you today. With me is the return of Mr. Greg Doss, an esteemed Army veteran and also a very prominent activist. You can find him on the regular over at City Hall here in the city of Tampa, or even now these days at our Hillsborough County Commission meetings. And so, if you want to see Doss in action, check out his YouTube channel, GD Napsy. That's GDNAPSC. And I assure you, good times will be had, especially for those of you who are so politically inclined as Dawson and I are. Best wishes to my buddy Anibal, who is out on rest, getting
Okay.
some much needed rest, and hopefully we'll be back in action in the studio this coming Thursday.
Okay.
Doss, you and I love to kind of go back and forth on social media, but one of the reasons that I love having you on, and is because you know I can call you a friend. You know what I mean? We disagree, quite a bit on any number of issues, but at the same time, my saying is, you don't make it personal and you don't take it personal. You know what I mean? And so we discuss the issues and we debate, and again, we always end up agreeing to disagree, right? But
Yes.
we still maintain our friendship, and I think that's important to the foundational conversations that are happening about our political culture, our societal culture in this country, because we do feel more divided than ever. You
Well,
know, I,
that's why I say I would disagree with you. I don't think we're having the same kind of spirited conversations that at one time were a part of the natural discourse that would take place, particularly in politics. It's not as if the fractures are just at the grassroots or the citizenry level. It's gone to the levels where it's most important and where discourse is most needed in the chambers of Congress, whether it's local, state, or federal. The kind of discord that's needed for us to progress as a nation is just not taking place.
well,
And
you know what's funny, to kind of go down that path. The reason and I'd love to hear your theory behind it, but I think the reason that we are more ideologically divided than ever is because of the elimination of pork bills in our budget. That honestly used to be what brought a lot of the left and right together. They would go and they'd kind of put these sweetheart bills together where they'd take a lot of taxpayer dollars back to their home district, and there would be a lot of handshaking, a lot of backroom deals and that sort of thing. And once those pork bills were eliminated, now all of a sudden it was like every man for himself, and not to mention that these guys was that?
special interests have become stronger over the last 20 years.
Well,
That I think
right.
they're much stronger than they used to be years ago. Or people may don't have the same moral fiber, which is crazy for politics. I don't know. We'll
Well,
continue.
the money again is now, they're fighting, more for those dollars, because again, we famously know, and I'll give him kudos, most recently, to thanks to David Jolly, we now know that 60-70% of the time that a congressperson is in Washington D.C., they spend it fundraising.
Yeah.
And so when you take the pork bills out of the equation, and now all these companies and all these people back home aren't getting those federal tax dollars, Well, now you got to find some other way, to keep that reelection money coming in, especially when you're dealing with the NRCC, the NRSC, and the Democrat counterparts.
Well, and also there's a great amount of grift and severe. Not, I won't say there's never been a time where politicians were selfish, but there seems to be a pride in certain selfishness among the general Congress in general. I don't care what side of the aisle you're
Yeah.
on.
Hmm.
There's like no one is actually looking out for the people, and the people have essentially ceded everything to talking heads. Like we don't
Yeah.
have as much political active. You call me? I'm not an activist. I'm just a guy who might be active in his own life, you
Yeah.
know. And I have children and grandchildren, but we don't have like town halls aren't real town halls anymore. They're almost like
Echo chambers.
yeah. So I don't, and that's where my greater concern is. The dumbing down of America has set this thing. It has this thing in motion, and I'm wondering, can we even get enough force to move it back in the direction that it needs to? For posterity reasons, of course. I'm over 50, so I know there's more of my rearview mirrors down the road, but we have an obligation to leave something stable to our children and our grandchildren.
But in looking at the discourse, right, and looking at the red versus blue, I mean, I think it just goes to the core of American culture. Like it's this good versus evil, that like anything, people are drawn to it, right? It's the reason why we like our sports the way that we do. It's the reason why we don't like ties in football,
Yeah,
or even, or in baseball or any sport that we play in this country. It's
understandable.
everybody wants to be on the winning side, and so to touch on one of your favorite topics, when I think when people talked about making America great again, it was kind of that feeling of superiority. I remember growing up in the 80s, that we felt that America could do no wrong, right? That we felt that, we were the world police and that everything that we did and said was right.
And in
Um,
the best interest, all right?
yeah, and then it was in everybody's best interest to just do what we said.
Yeah.
And as that has eroded, and that's a whole nother show in and of itself, but I think for some people there's that desire that, hey, maybe if we can get the country's influence back to the mountaintop, that maybe everything else will kind of sort itself out.
That has always been my concern. And to what you were saying is we thought our position was the best. When I joined the military, oddly enough, um, that's the way I kind of felt. Like, we know it's right anyway. Or and being young and naive, you kind of think things a little differently. And I think I joined the military in 1985, and went active in '86. So I actually got a 40-year anniversary coming up for active duty. But
Thank you for your service.
but yeah. But when I was over there, I was thinking, what would happen if the day ever came where the rest of the world aligned against America? And this is what I was thinking. Granted, always soldiering forward, but just some of the things that I saw, I'm like, especially because when you're dealing, especially being in another country, and you're dealing with the people in other nations, and you kind of figure, the and propaganda is much worse now than it was then. But the propaganda was a little stronger because you didn't have other accesses to information. But I'm like, there's some people here who don't like us being here.
Right.
That's always been the fact. I mean, that's
Yeah.
always been the fact. And now here we are later, and we're seeing alliances being formed uh, with people who should be our allies, and also people who our allies should be against. But now there's unique coalitions forming, and my concern is that Americans, through our arrogance or what have you, don't realize that we're really not that big of a country in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, but see, I take the approach that, like the head of NATO, said the other day at the World Economic Forum, it's like, everybody in Europe, wants to, you know, kind of unite, against Donald Trump, and, and it's kind of an us versus them, or a him versus them, type of environment, but like he said, it's like, who's going to defend Europe? It's like, they can't, you know what I mean? And there obviously there's some bit of arrogance to that because it's true. It's like, you and what army, right? Because Europe really doesn't have the means nor the finances to defend itself. They don't have the resources to do it.
They
Now,
have
when we're talking about China, okay, that's a different story. That's why we keep our ears perked up when it comes to China. I still think Russia is, a house of cards. I think a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. I don't think they're anywhere near as strong as they, claim to be or try to,
definitely not
re-
as strong as they used to be. And but the
no.
thing is, the equalizer for all is the nuclear weapon.
Hmm.
Conventionally, if everything was conventional, it might be a little bit different. But because I can't imagine anybody saying I'm good enough with just conceding. The one unfortunate reality is, despite and I love the nation. I'm proud of my service. We haven't done well conventionally since World War II.
Yeah.
So and so as you say, who's going to defend them? Well, uh, natives defend themselves, to the best of their ability at all costs. And I don't think Russia has shown us that they're not who they used to be. Because otherwise, this thing would Ukraine
Ukraine.
wouldn't have gone this long at all. But
Right.
then again, we watched Russia get their behinds whooped by Afghanistan when people's greatest possession were a camel and a rifle,
Yeah.
and that's 84 if I'm correct.
Well,
So
look, and to that point, I mean, we didn't do that well against, all those camels either. You know what I mean?
that's my
Like,
point. We haven't done well in conventional warfare because,
right.
for one, we're not on our own terrain, and see that's the other
Right.
reality. As long as you're isolated to some degree, and you have the borders of the oceans and the northern and southern borders, which are really aren't that big a deal. Nobody's invading us from there. Um, the but if the rest of the world essentially ostracizes us, which is my greater concern, then we have a much larger problem down the road, and we have
Yeah.
bonds out there too. Remember?
Right. Well, and we're starting to see some of that, right? Like, we're starting to see some countries kind of figure out that to retaliate, if they start dropping their bonds, then that's going to affect us economically, But I mean, we saw BRICS fall apart. BRICS already is fallen apart. As the center right candidates start to kind of continue to take office, all throughout Latin America, especially. And so it's one of those things where, um, again, with the personalities aside, I think the more that we, again, bring back manufacturing, we bring back, because again, the fact that we don't make our own computer chips is a matter of national security.
But
The
tried.
fact.
Remember, we tried to
What's
get
that?
that through the Chips Act. With
But it's
I don't
coming.
know,
Like,
but do we
Nvidia is already producing in the United States. I mean,
who's
it's.
working for them though?
What do you mean?
The people that do
Oh,
most work for them are not United States citizens. The
here in
best,
the United States.
the best of the tech people aren't U.S.
Well,
citizens.
that right. Well, that gets into the
Right,
whole H-1B conversation. You know what I mean? Which
right.
again, I realized that there was a time where that was necessary, where we were falling behind. But at this point, I think we could essentially scale that back, because there have been, I know firsthand, from having worked in the Senate, there's companies that take advantage or have taken advantage of those H-1B visas to import talent where it really wasn't necessary. And they've exploited that, as a loophole to get cheaper labor into the country.
Right, but at the same time that this is going on, we taken a negative approach to education because you can't advance technologically while you're dumbing the nation down at the same time. I think, despite what some people think, I'm a large proponent of putting good money into great education. I believe in discipline in every academic area. You have to have discipline. You have to have structure in classrooms, like the conversation we had in the other show the other night.
Yeah.
We have to get back to some of the traditional values that existed in these areas. Otherwise, we're going to continue to fall farther and farther behind. It's just
Culturally, we have a very big problem in our schools, because the accountability has gone from the student and the parents to now the teacher, and so now somehow, a lot of these parents, and hey, I'm a parent of a 10-year-old. Luckily for me, I know better because, my daughter's mother, my sister, and, my girlfriend are all in the education system, but I hear it every single day, about parents that come in and wanting to blame the school, wanting to blame the teacher for the shortcomings, be it behaviorally or academically for their kids.
right.
And I don't know what or how that shift took place, but I think it's definitely a combination of that, and I think it's also a combination of the fact that I think the school model, as we kind of know it, needs to be heavily reformed, because it doesn't fit, today's environment, today's culture. I mean, we now know, right, that our education system was founded on, kind of assembly line principles,
Right.
and trying to prepare people for those types of roles, rather than higher education. And so there's always been that disconnect. But even still, like again, like kids are just not responding, largely due to their access to technology, to the educational classroom as we know it today. And so you're right, like there needs to be a huge cultural shift in our education. I think part of this problem also stems from the fact that, the higher education systems in our country, the universities and colleges, have also slipped away from the core of, what they're really there for. You've got all these ridiculous courses and degrees that aren't going to get you anywhere, and yet they still manage to somehow increase costs every single year.
I
um,
don't understand that at all, especially as a parent with children that are seeking higher education. Well, I have a daughter who's a doctor already, but I have a son that's on his way, and another daughter that's seems to be on the same path. But I would agree, and I would say this. I meant to say this the other night. Some traditions were actually good. you know,
yeah.
certain things there should have gotten away from it, and I think structurally, certain institutions demand a structure. You just have to. There has
Mhm.
to be a rigidness in the way that things are applied or executed. And I think in education, it's one of them. I don't say you have to be not, of course, a critical thinker or a progressive thinker, but when it comes to how you are to behave in an academic environment, particularly one that's government funded, because interestingly enough, and in the abundance of transparency, my kids have private education. My daughter went to Berkeley.
Right.
My son went to Jesuit, and I have another one is in private school, and she's probably going to go to Berkeley as well. And I would tell them, I said, what you all experienced in your classroom was commonplace when I grew up. I didn't come up in a classroom where people were acting out of line all the time. I just never saw that, and that made part of
See,
my
and
disappointment.
I'll tell you, it was definitely during my schooling. So between 85 to 2000, I graduated in 98, but where I saw that kind of evolution taking place, where there was a high respect for teachers and the classroom, and to by the time I was in high school, I mean, I saw kids yelling at teachers. I saw kids flipping desks over. Like I saw, I mean, then of course in some of the schools that I went to, because I was in the magnet program, which famously was really, an integration program. But in the magnet schools in South Florida, they would put these magnet programs in underperforming schools, or lower income areas. And so you'd get in there, and I literally went from a school that had brand new textbooks and nice, nice equipment in class and desks and chairs to, books with missing and torn pages, and they're all written all up. And I mean, it was just it was drastic. It was the difference, in those two environments.
About parent
Um,
participation, was that also drastically different in the two
what
environments?
that?
Parent participation, parental
Oh,
participation.
absolutely. Yeah, it's all correlated.
Right.
It's all correlated. I think the parental involvement and the quality of the school that your child is in is directly
Yeah,
related.
natural concomitants,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Because
Well,
even
because if the parents aren't there, they don't know what's going on, and if they don't know what's going on, then they're not going to be there to to speak up for their kids to ensure that their kids are getting the proper resources they need.
and even if your resources are not what they probably should be, if as long as you have a strong foundation, a core, like you say, within the parents, the children are going to always perform better. My dad tells me the story. He went to all his classes were in a one room building, and my dad never went to an integrated school. My mom is actually in the first
Wow.
class of Warner Robins, but my dad now has 4 degrees, right?
Yeah.
With advanced degree. So mom as well. So but I think what the core values that are required in certain like I said institutions, when that started to erode, that you got to remember that came after me, at least after me for high school, because there was still that still existed for me. But when I went back into the education system for the 3 or 4 years that I worked, because I was in elementary, and then I ended up leaving at from Hillsborough Adult Education, I saw the decline. But
Hmm.
what's interesting is we had those with ESOL students that were a part of the adult education program that from other countries who still had they had the essential core values that we had growing up. You come to school, you learn, you don't disrupt, uh, and I think that allows educate learning to take place. Is when you have extreme discipline in these areas, you just need it because you only have them for a few hours any damn way.
Yeah. Well, and I understand the way that our school funding is done at the local level, right? Because if I live in an upper middle class neighborhood, right, then I want as much of my tax dollars that are going into the school system to go back to the schools that are in my neighborhood,
Right.
you know. But again, the unfortunate thing is that means that you keep certain schools at the top and certain schools stay at the bottom. And so it's like, well, we're either a community or we're not, and this is where I think, as conservative as I am, I think, and I don't know that this is maybe even a conservative or a liberal kind of standpoint, but to me is like, why doesn't the school system distribute all the funds equally? You can still, attach a dollar value to each student that you have, which I think is the right way to do it, especially in this kind of era of school choice. But at the same time, you know, why, and again, goes some of it is definitely due to parental involvement, but you see like Newsom High School, which is an upper middle class neighborhood in Lithia, in our county,
Very
gets a
nice.
brand new state of the art, probably multi-million dollar, performing arts center, built in their school. And then you've got other schools that, again, have roof leaks and air conditioning issues, and can barely,
Some of
get
them are still old.
the funds to be operational.
Some of them are very old too, Torres, and also some of them are really almost at capacity because even as new as Sumner is,
Yeah.
where I had a daughter graduate from Sumner, um, that it was at capacity, but now like
Oh, they were at capacity the day they were almost at capacity the day they opened. I mean,
but now
yeah.
you got what's it, the IKEA, what's the school?
Kill Morgan. Hmm.
Morgan out there. I haven't seen the school. Heavy said it looks really well. The facilities for sports, whatever, look nice. I'm hoping the rest
I've
of it
heard
is.
it's massive. I mean, I've heard it's a
Yeah,
huge
yeah.
school.
I saw the aerial view. Yeah, it is pretty big.
And look,
But
I came from a big school. I mean, my school was overcrowded. Well, my school, I think, was supposed to be designed for 2,000 students. When I graduated, there were 4,000 students. And so but again, that should mean that that school had more money to work with,
First,
to
it's
uh,
because of the per student allocation, right?
yeah. But I mean, I could tell you, like, there were certainly examples I could show you that where it's like, okay, where and how is this money being spent? Because it wasn't being spent on textbooks, it wasn't being spent on desks and chairs, and so, and I realize there's a lot operationally that money has to go towards, but I also, again, it seems to me that, again, the funds are also just not being allocated, in the way that they should be. And this is why,
Are
you
you
know,
alleging they were misappropriated, possibly, or you just think just
oh, absolutely.
okay?
Well,
Well,
I mean, famously, I mean, we had that half cent tax increase that was supposed to towards when we had the air conditioning epidemic, in the schools, where all the schools were having AC issues, which again here in Florida is a major problem.
yeah,
And so the people agreed. They said, fine, if you need money for air conditioning units and this is going to solve it, then let's pay for it. And the tax went through. Well, fast forward a year later, and they were still having air conditioning issues, but all of a sudden, this school gets a new turf football field, and this other school gets electric vehicles for their driver's ed program, and this other school gets a brand new playground. And and again, it's just like every other level of government. It's like you can't give them $1 because they'll spend $1.50 and they'll spend it on whatever they want and not what they're supposed to be spending it on.
and parents are supposed to kind of operate as the oversight as well. Well, the administrators absolutely. That's why you elect these people. But the
Right.
parents have to operate almost as a oversight of these people when they don't do their jobs, and then you move to replace these people with people that are more in tune with what the schools need. The problem is, it almost seems that most people who get in these positions after a while stop functioning in the capacity that they were chosen to perform.
Well, and there's pushback, right? Because I know people who've served in the school board, and they'll tell you, "Hey, look, I tried to get this thing through, but I had 3, 4 other people go against me on it."
Right.
And they have their agendas, just like at the county. Whether they're red or blue, you got people that come in there and they're gonna have their special pet project, and it's like, okay, yeah, they come claiming that they're fiscal conservatives, yet when it's time, oh, hey, I want to build a new park, in my district. It's like, well, we don't need a park. We need the roads paved, and look, to their credit, I don't know what got into the water over at City Hall, but all of a sudden, all these roads are getting paved. So it.
Have you
If
seen our
any,
budget?
if anything, I think it's more of a sign that there's an election coming,
Right.
right?
So you've seen the budget for the upcoming election. And there's
Right,
also things that they want to do as far as tourism and other things because Tampa's budget has exploded
right. But
over
yet,
the like,
according to them, there's still not enough money, and they still want to raise taxes.
yeah, but the if the budget is large, they know that there's money somewhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out of nowhere. Now out of
But
nowhere.
again, like it's like I used this example recently, right? Because a lot of this stuff started with Buckhorn, and I know we're getting hyper local here, right? But the Riverwalk concept is something that's also spreading around the country, to any city that has a body of water in its downtown area. But so they built up the west side of the Hillsborough River with this Riverwalk, all right? And I've used it. It's great. I like it. I get it. And look, people use it. I'll be honest. Honestly, I see more people on that Riverwalk than I do in any of our city buses. I'll tell you that. And but do we really need a Riverwalk on both sides of the river? It's like,
Did you need a Ferris wheel?
it's what's that?
Did you need a Ferris wheel?
Right, the Ferris wheel, like, which is, I've never been on it, but I've been to it. I've been to the one in Orlando. I've been to the one in Miami, and they're expensive and they're ridiculous. And no,
And man, well, because it's in Miami, it could, but we don't do well with hurricanes and flooding anyway.
But it was the middle of the day, and at the one in Miami, and there was nobody even there. It wasn't even operational. Nobody was even using it.
Right, because once you've been there, it's kind of like, for what? You're going to get the same tourist. It's not going to draw you anything more because
right.
it's sitting
Well, and
there.
again, it's like, do we not have a single creative brain cell, in the city council or the county commission to come up with something of our own that's unique to Tampa? I mean, there's another podcast, shout out to Garrett Greco and the Tampa Bay Developer Podcast. But he was kind of knocking on the trolleys, right? And I get his standpoint. The trolleys are not the most efficient kind of, obviously modern way of moving people around. Right. But I'll tell you, the only reason that the trolley is as popular as it is because it's free, right? Because somebody's paying for it. We're paying for it. It's just
there's this thing
right.
Yeah.
But to me, that's also like the same thing with like the San Francisco trolley, right? Like that's kind of a landmark kind of thing. Like that's a very unique thing to that city. And right. I think our trolleys, again, are unique to Tampa. And it's something that, it's not modern. And look, I love modern stuff. But it's okay that that's not modern. That's part of our history. That's part of, the foundational infrastructure of Tampa. Now, do I think it should be expanded? Absolutely. I think if
but at what cost?
Right. But that's the thing too. And so this is where I'm completely on board with the city wanting to, get rid of the county city partnership. They want to get rid of Hart and establish like their own committee, their own transportation outfit, so that if they want to build light rail, they can build light rail, because right now they're dependent on the county, to get that passed, right? But I'm all for it, because you know what? I don't live in the city and I don't want to pay for something that's in the city. And so if they want to expand the streetcar, if they want light rail, and the city wants to pay for it, let them pay for it. I mean, now they'll probably pass it in a sales tax or something anyway. So
that's, you could always increase the sales tax, even if it's by a penny, which I know people probably flip out over, but things have to be paid for, because government, despite what people think, government doesn't, the money has to come from us. Now, I think that it could be appropriated a lot dang better, but you're not going to get that. And I know some people raise the issue that even you, genius, you raise like everybody can't be there in the middle of the day like me, but we have to get to the point where we take our time. I don't know what the solution is to that, because the meetings are when the meetings are, but I don't know that people not attending city council meetings is the issue. I still think there's not enough people who are politically conscious participating in the ways that we should be generally participating. Yeah. I think that's part of the problem. That's why these guys, some of these city council members and county commissioners just seem to have like a free reign to what they do.
We've touched on a lot, just here in like the first 30 minutes, but I will tell you, a great solution was actually a startup that a guy from Tampa, a good friend of mine, started years ago. Unfortunately, he took the payday and sold his startup to Microsoft. And I'm sure it was a nice fat check, but it was a company called CitizenVestor. And to me, honestly, I'm very motivated, to maybe just copy the model and start it up again, because what it created was any of those kind of ancillary budget items, like parks and transportation projects and any of these little pet projects that the city or the county wanted to spend money on. What they would do is say, okay, if the community wants this, Okay, let them raise a certain percentage of the money on their own, and then if it meets that goal, like a crowdfunding goal, this is when the crowdfunding craze started in the early days of crowdfunding. If it met the crowdfunding goal, then that district, that city or county or whatever, would then put up the rest of the funds.
Erasers.
You
Well,
know, but that to me also it showed, okay, this is where we're allocating our money, but it empowered the citizenship to also have control over what was prioritized.
but you had to get active in doing it too, and
Right. But it
some
made it easy, right? Because now you could be keyboard activist and go on online and push out your project, right? And get other people to
right,
buy
right.
in on your project. And if you wanted to prioritize, let's say, the streetcar over the Riverwalk, you could do that, right? You could advocate for that. And if the one project met its fundraising goal before the other, then congratulations, you won.
But let me speak. Let me say this as I'll never say devil's advocate, but on the other side is the people who are most active. Then it boils down to, well, who can raise the most money for an issue that certain people agree with, but that doesn't mean that the another thing, like you may have, we won't get money for a Ferris wheel, doesn't mean we don't need a park.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you come to a happy
Oh
medium to
yeah,
say,
no, it's well, one project doesn't cancel out the other. You know what I mean? So
well,
that project stays on that list,
but it will
but
never
it
get
just doesn't
fundraised,
get the priority,
right?
and so let's say the streetcar, meets its fundraising goal, so that gets the green light, then you've got, let's say, 3 4 other projects that are next in line, and then whichever one meets its fundraising goal after that then gets, the next
But
green
that's
light.
my concern is who sets the priority, and then,
The fundraising does.
well, but that goes back to my, when they set that particular priority, they're going to disregard everything else to the side. That's human nature. I want what I want.
Well well, that's the thing too, like if a project gets up there and it doesn't, well, no, because again, like the agreement is like, hey, if the community meets the fundraising goal, then they have to green light that project. You know what I mean? Like the district then has to green light that project. It's not a if or when. It's the basically the citizens have spoken, and now this project has to get greenlit, because to make it onto the platform, it had to have already gotten past the approval process.
But who did the approving? This is my point.
The city council or the county commission, or
Even though there's 6 or 7 seats, if 5 say we were good with this and 2 say no, the halves are always going to win.
yeah, no, and there's that aspect too, and and again, I'm sure every community kind of dealt with that aspect differently. Maybe some of it could have
Like
been, you
East
know,
Tampa, prime example. Look how you hear a lot of people in East Tampa complain about what East Tampa is not getting, but
right.
East Tampa doesn't have representation that can ensure that certain things. You have a representative, and sometimes it's unfair to a representative to get cascaded with a bunch of blame when it's like, I still only represent one vote, and
Yeah.
I represent one vote in a marginalized community at that.
Yeah. Well, and then again, that's just, it also comes down to, like, how are the districts drawn, right? And
Exactly.
I can tell you that, you know, like, for example, the representative that represents, like, that very part of the county, the eastern part of the county, plus or the city, I mean, and like in New Tampa and all that stuff. Well, guess who normally gets elected? The guy from, like, the New Tampa area, not the guy from East Tampa. And so where do his priorities or her priorities lie? It lies in New Tampa.
Wherever,
you know
wherever they,
and and they're gonna neglect that part of the community that didn't vote for them in the first place.
and money permeates all portions of politics. And I think and money does equate to influence, no matter how people feel about it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my concerns with some of this stuff. I'm
But
a big local guy.
no, look, I mean, and that's part of the reason I love what you do, and and I know that some of it's motivated by your own experience, and and again, people can learn more about that on your YouTube channel, GDNAPSC, on YouTube, GD Napsy, or you can search Greg Doss.
Greg Dawson,
Um,
BSC.
yeah, let me actually pull back the. There we go, so they can see how your name is spelled. Um, and again, it's unfortunate because again, the people that need to be at these county commission and city council meetings the most are the people that can't make it. Because again, most of us have 9 to 5 jobs that we have to be at. Um,
Yeah.
but and it's also this isn't unique to our community. This
Oh,
happens all over the country, and
absolutely.
and also because of the way our media is set up, people are paying more attention to what's happening in DC than what's happening in their own backyard.
And that
Um,
I like to really figure out how to get people's focus from. Granted, the federal government is extremely important, but I tell guys all the time, your governor has more power in your day to day life than the
yeah.
than the president does.
Yep, exactly. That city council person and that county commissioner has way more power than the president
Way
does.
more influence in your day to day life than the
Absolutely.
president, or it goes from bottom up and then top down. So
Yep.
um, people need to pay attention to those things.
Well,
Uh,
hey, we didn't get a chance to talk about any of the things that I wanted to talk about, but that's all right. It was a great
we will,
conversation.
but we will. But maybe
Well,
not anything that were on the agenda. But I think, nevertheless, you did raise very important issues, and
yeah,
hopefully, people who watch this will sit back and think about, how do I become more active in my local government? Because I think we've kind of lost sight of that. And even the people, I think
yeah.
a lot. You said there because they couldn't get there. I'm beginning to think too many people are apathetic. JT, that's
It
my
is. I mean,
way.
culturally, we just want everything as easy as possible. And look, it takes a lot of effort to go downtown, to go to a city council meeting, to go to a county commission meeting. People would rather stay home and make pretend everything's okay, rather than taking the time to go down there and face the people that make these decisions for them.
I'd agree, and I wish I could find a way to change that.
Or they'd rather argue about it online, thinking that that's going to accomplish something.
I think they just want to have somewhere they can get some attention. We are a bunch of attention of folks in
Yeah.
society today, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yep. Well, hey, Doss, thank you so much for joining me, man. I know you got
Oh,
an
I
appointment to
appreciate
run
having me.
to, and let's keep doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Oh, this is the easy way.
That's right.
You
This is the
gotta,
easy way.
you gotta leave home, and I appreciate you for everything you do. And I'm always open, and hope Nebo gets better too. Tell him Squid or Greg said what's good, and
All right,
hopefully you.
man. I will. Have a good one, man. Thank you.
And as a listen, it's always important. Sometimes it ain't about right or wrong. More important, it's about clarity. You never
Yep.
reach resolution if you're not willing to engage in honest dialogue. Even if the dialogue is with somebody like Torres, hug the person you love and love the person you hug.
Uh-huh.
I'm Greg. I'm saying peace, and I'm out. Thanks a lot, Torres, for having me, man.
Thanks for watching.
All right.